Because of a double dip last year, in the calendar year, wealthy people in particular are not seeing the kinds of income that they have previously seen, and likely will see again in the not too distant future. But that has an impact on Connecticut's budget.
That's Connecticut Governor Dannel Malloy talking about his state's new budget. It is looking at a nearly $1 billion deficit, and that's forcing the governor to lay off some state workers. Nearly 200 just got pink slips, and thousands could be losing their jobs when all is said and done. Well, we visited Hartford yesterday, and we sat down with the Democratic governor to talk about everything from criminal justice reform to the presidential race. Here's part one of our conversation. Governor, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's great to be with you.
Particular industries, certainly the financial sector, call Connecticut home. On a different reason, albeit we saw GE leave. How concerned should folks in Connecticut be that other anchor tenants might also move to other states, and also some of the folks, whether it be in Greenwich or Stamford, where you have some of those financial institutes or boutiques that are set up there, might move elsewhere?
Well, I think you got to analyze the GE transaction in particular. There's 700 people on that campus. What GE has said is they're going to move 200 people to Boston. And we know that as other businesses have been spun out of GE, they are by and large staying in Connecticut. Synchrony, which is their bank, has been spun off, is staying in Connecticut, and has grown a substantial number of jobs just in the last 6 months. So I think that people have to understand that GE has gotten out of the financial services business, except with respect to their own products. And as a result, it's a very changed company. For instance, just last week, they filed to be removed from the too big to fail list. That was going to have ramifications one way or the other. We've been on the winning side of some of those transactions. We've been on the losing side of some of those transactions. You then asked a larger question, and that is, are we going to continue to be a business center? And the answer is yes. I mean, we're seeing businesses move out of New York State into Connecticut on a regular basis. We've helped them move to Connecticut, and that's going to continue, quite frankly, particularly as you look at tax pressures and other cost pressures in New York State. We're going to continue to play the role that we have historically played, which is when companies want to diversify their location in the greater New York area, Connecticut, and particularly Fairfield County, is one of the places they diversify to. Third point I want to make on this, however, and that is that we've got to get transportation right if we're going to sustain this. And that's why we've rolled out a 30-year plan to catch up on the investment side of transportation, so that Metro North is more like a subway than it is a traditional rail system, and so that system gets expanded to places like Waterbury and Danbury, where you will be able to take trains on a regular basis. It requires that we modernize our highways and our bridges and do other things to make sure that we're competitive on a transportation basis.
You've made headlines and have been recognized on the subject of crime and punishment. You cut the prison population, but the crime rate went down. Were you lucky, or was there a method to how this works? Because one would think it'd have an inverse reaction.
Well, recidivism is down. I think recidivism is the term that we apply to people going back to jail after they've gotten out of jail. And what we've seen is a decline in recidivism. I think some of that's a result of us getting certain things right. We're doing a better job in preparing people to go back to a broader society. We're providing more job and housing outreach. No one's leaving jail without health insurance. We're making sure the paperwork gets done before you leave, so that if you need drug treatment or you need medical attention, it's immediately available to you. Making those changes have been part of leading to a 48-year low in crime. Put it in perspective, in 2014, our violent crime rate dropped 2.5 times the national drop. 2.5 times. Clearly, because we're doing things well, because we have better gun laws, because we've changed our approach to prison, because we've taken young people out of the system that's most likely to lead them to be in prison. You put a young person in prison, then don't be surprised that they spend the next 20 years in and out of prison for crimes that they've committed. You keep that young person out of prison. You get them to an age where they're less likely to make the kinds of mistakes that young people we all know make, and all of a sudden you're going to avoid a 20-year career in criminal behavior. We're doing things that are paying off.
In fact, this past weekend, we've been involved with this organization that educates inmates behind bars. And as a consequence, they've had a less than 1% recidivism rate for maximum security facilities, in fact. People may remember you from a 60 Minutes piece where you, along with others, went to a German prison that doesn't resemble any prison that they can see in the U.S. What would you say to somebody, say, time out? These are bad guys who did bad things. This should be about punishment more than rehabilitation. How would you answer that?
Well, who pays the price? You know, it costs us $120 to $150 a night to keep somebody in prison. And by the way, you commit a crime and it's a crime that should send you to prison, you should go to prison. And
you're a former prosecutor yourself.
Right. I tried 23 felony cases, had convictions in 22 of those. I did 4 homicides when I was in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. So nobody's tougher on crime. I'm not arguing that we should be tough on crime. What I am saying is that we need to intervene better earlier on in people's lives to defer them from a life in crime. And by the way, if they make a stupid mistake, to get them back on the road to recovery. You don't want to be writing out a check for $120 a night to 21,000 people, do you?
No. Talk in that regard about a second chance society, what it is, and why certain ages maybe we're treating wrong currently in the criminal justice system.
We treat 18-year-olds as if they're full adults, right? That we're gonna treat you the same way for a mistake or a crime, however you want to refer to it, as we treat somebody who's older than you. Then let's look at other laws. We won't sell you liquor. We won't sell you cigarettes, but we're going to treat you as an adult in the criminal justice system. What I'm saying is we need to intervene. An 18-year-old does something stupid that could end up in a record for the rest of their lives, affecting where they live, what job they might have, or whether they can get a student loan in the future. If we can help avoid that, we're actually making a payment on a long-term basis to a more useful, productive individual.
Up next, more with Governor Malloy, including his emotional meeting with the families right after the Sandy Hook tragedy.